Hi, this is Vivo Yolu, and I'm at the Royal Festival Hall, and I'm here with the lovely Kathy Ennis. Hi, Kathy.
Hello, Viv. Lovely to meet you at last.
At last. So, you may hear me say this as often as I think till the end of this year, till all my interviews in 2012, where so many people I had to interview, but we've moved it and moved it and moved it, and Kathy is one of those first people. We were supposed to have an interview early September.
Yeah, it was. I think it was right at the beginning of September. Yeah.
Yeah, and here we are, early December, 3 months on, and we finally got it together. So it's a real pleasure to finally meet you.
Thank you. It's a nice early Christmas present.
Yes. Oh, thank you. So Kathy is a mentor, a trainer, speaker, and she's the creator of 4VP. Is that what it's called? Yeah. And method of personal brand and development for business growth and success.
Yeah. Yes.
So when did you set it up?
It's interesting. Somebody was asking me this the other day about my business. I've actually had a business since 2001.
Oh, that long ago.
Yeah. So what happened was I set up a business. I trained as an image consultant 12 years ago.
And can I just say, you are looking really, really lovely. I've been meaning to say this blouse is really beautiful. So go ahead.
Thank you very much. I was working full time, and I was not 100% happy in terms of the
What kind of job were you doing?
At that particular point in time, I was working for a chartered institute, a professional body. I was in their membership development section, and I was helping their members with training, career advice, mentoring, things to do with issues that they might be having at work, as well as liaising with public bodies, government departments. So it was a very mixed role, but primarily it was about taking people from one place to another depending on their need.
Yeah.
So.
Oh. And what made you think that image consulting was something you'd like to do?
Well, for people who can't see me, and you can't, I'm quite tall, but I'm also quite wide, and I have been for all of my life. And one of the things that I found as a child and a young adult was that people judged me quite strongly on terms of my outward appearance, and being fat is not an acceptable thing in today's society. And I'm in my 50s now, but it's still, been quite a difficult journey. But I was bought something called a colour analysis by my husband as a birthday present about 15 years ago. And because I'm a large person, I'd spent most of my life dressed in black because I'd been told that it's a colour that slims you down. Well, I know quite categorically now that it's nothing to do with the colour, it's lots of other things. But I'd lived my life in black, and as a very pale-skinned redhead, it was not necessarily the best colour for me to be dressing myself in. So I went off for this colour analysis and came out a changed person. And I started putting into effect the recommendations that had been made in terms of the kinds of colours I should be wearing, sorts of things I might do with my hair and makeup. And interestingly, the jobs I had started to change, the amount of money I was earning started to move up, the impact that I was having in terms of my job and the confidence that I gained as a person all grew massively. So I thought, there's something in this. I'm very interested in what's happening here. So I investigated how you train, and I sat on it for about 2.5 to 3 years, and then I went off and I did the training. And it's just one of those things. As I say, I never imagined in a million years that I would be doing anything around what I describe as visual communication now. I never imagined in a million years that I would ever actually have my own business. I was born into a family where we were employees. We would work for people for the rest of our lives and then hopefully have enough through a pension to enjoy a few years afterwards. And so it was a complete change of lifestyle, absolute mindset completely. And that was simply because of almost like a chance thing that happened. But I'm finding more and more and more, everybody I'm talking to, this whole aspect of the universe converging and chance, karma, call it whatever you want, is the fact that these things are happening to everybody I'm engaging with.
Really? So, what do you think made your husband buy you that color analysis gift present?
It was a very, very practical thing. When we moved into our first flat, we didn't have very much money. And we couldn't afford to pay for people to do work for us, like painting and decorating, etc. So what I did was I went off and did a City and Guilds painting and decorating course.
Oh, right.
So that I learned how to wallpaper and paint properly and all different types of paint techniques and those sorts of things, so that I could do it at home and not have to pay somebody else. And as a consequence, really, really interested in interior design and colour and the use of colour in the home and those sorts of things. So when it came to buying me a gift, he thought, well, what's she interested in? Well, she's interested in colour. Oh, I've seen this advert for this thing that's a colour analysis. I know it's not to do with paint, but she might enjoy it. So that's what he did. He bought me that as a gift. So.
I think that's just so wonderful.
Oh, I've got one in a million. It's wonderful.
Oh, no, that's fantastic. So, you found the course obviously interesting, engaging, and what made you think that you should take it to the next level?
It was when I first trained, it was through an interest. As I said, at that time I was working full time, so Monday to Friday. It was quite a high-pressured job. It wasn't a 9-to-5 job, it was the job that you started and you finished when it started and when it finished. So my thought was that what I'd be able to do is do some of this work perhaps at weekends and that sort of thing. And the interesting thing was that it did start to take over, but although I trained as an image consultant, I was never interested in it precisely for the fashion side of things. For one point, none of the clothes have ever fitted me, so I've never been interested in who designs for whom and who makes what shoes. I mean, with a size 9 foot, you can not very often get into really nice... Well, I've got a size 8 one side and a size 9 the other, and that's really interesting. So for me, it was all about the impact that it had on people's perceptions of themselves, and then the impact it had on people's perceptions of them. So I started doing this and working just at weekends, and people would come along for, say, a colour analysis, or they'd come along for a style session where we'd look at things like their body shape and their personality and match clothing and styles to them. And it started to grow, and I started to get more into the whole concept of what's known as impression management. So it took me more off into the psychological side of these aspects, and what, as I say, the impact that it could have on people's perceptions of themselves. And so I started looking at the concept of impression management, which is the idea that as human beings we are natural chameleons. We can easily shift from one persona into another depending on the circumstance we find ourselves in. So we know naturally that there are certain behaviours, language patterns, etc., that you might use in a job interview, as opposed to if you're in the pub with your mates, or you may behave and dress differently at a funeral than you would at a wedding. And these things happen, we flow in and out of these. And one of the things I always ask people when I'm talking to groups is I do ask, is there anybody who has, for example, language that they use in their family that are family words? Anybody outside wouldn't understand what you were talking about. And usually these words come about because perhaps a child or a baby has made a mistake, and it's a word you just use. I always give the example, one of my nieces was born with severe learning difficulties and never had the opportunity to learn to speak properly. And her favourite fruit is the banana. but she can only call it a lala. So in our family, when we talk to each other about bananas, we talk about lalas. But there's no way I'd go into a greengrocer and say, can I have a pound of lalas, please? Because they'd think I was nuts. So the whole idea of impression management is the fact that if we naturally can shift from one persona to another, can't we actually harness that ability and think about it more constructively, and think about, and this is the question I always say to my clients to ask themselves, who do I need to be tomorrow? Because if you think about the activities you've got to undertake in a particular day, that will help you understand your behaviours, even your dress, how you might dress. So, for example, today I'm meeting you. Then after this, I'm going to the City Business Library where I'm doing some work with them. They're running a programme for graduates who are unemployed. Oh. So I'm doing some work with them on interview skills and presenting an interview and those sorts of things. And then this evening I'm off to a networking event. Oh. So I had to think about that flow of the day and what would be most appropriate for me to wear, the kind of bag I might take, as well as the idea that with a group of people who are unemployed, who are younger, I might not want to go in suited and booted because it might create a barrier between us. So this whole idea of being able to manage people's perceptions of us is where impression management came from. Then that led to another concept, and that is of sensation transference.
Oh, explain that.
I read a book by an author who I really adore, Malcolm Gladwell.
I love Malcolm.
Oh,
he's one of my favourite.
He's so fantastic. Yes. And I didn't start with The Tipping Point. I did go back and read that afterwards, but the first one of his that I got into was Blink.
Oh, I haven't read that.
Oh, you should.
You must be the first person who said Blink is a good book.
Oh,
it didn't do as well as Tipping Point or The Outliers.
It's a fantastic book, and it's talking about the power of first impressions, and the idea that mostly first impressions are pretty accurate, and that what happens as we get older is that we stop trusting them and we seek other evidence, but often that evidence then takes us back to what our first impression was anyway. And in that he talks, he gives, the way he writes, he tells stories, and that's what I love. He's a massive storyteller, and he weaves stories in and out
into concepts.
Oh, absolutely. And he tells this story about a brandy. Okay, there's an American brandy that is the market leader, sitting on the shelves. It's doing really, really well, and then a new product comes on the market and very quickly starts to outstrip in terms of sales the original one, and the company who produce the original one can't understand why, because what they start doing is going around and doing taste tests, the old Pepsi challenge kind of thing, which tastes better, Pepsi or Coke, and people are saying, well, your brand tastes better, yet they're still buying the other one. And it was when they actually went to the shelves and looked at how the other one was presenting itself that they recognised that the packaging was actually having a very significant impact on people's perception of the product inside. Okay, and this goes back to branding and marketing. A guy called Lewis Cheskin started looking at what he called the aesthetics of marketing and branding back in the early 20th century, and this is what he describes it as. He describes it as sensation transference, and the idea that what we do is we transfer our sensations of the product based on the outward and the inward. So we look at the packaging and we think, what's inside is going to be really nice. Now, what's inside has to live up to the expectation, because if it doesn't, that really throws it. But it is the packaging and the product combined that actually make us want to buy into things. And I always ask people, how do you choose wine? Most people choose wine because they like the look of the label, because most of us aren't wine connoisseurs.
Yeah.
We know we might like a particular grape, we might like a Chardonnay or a Merlot or something like that. But what we'll do is we'll say, there's 10 Merlots on the shelf in front of us, and what's the one with the nicest label? And perhaps then what's the cheapest one, but who knows? So it's very much this idea is that people judge things on what they see before what they taste, feel. And you look at people like Louis Cheskin, one of the major things he did, for example. I'll ask you a question here, though.
Okay, go on.
Okay. What colour is margarine?
Yellow.
No. Margarine is white. Louis Cheskin convinced margarine manufacturers to make it yellow so it could compete with butter.
Really?
What colour does Father Christmas wear?
Red.
Father Christmas wears green.
Really?
The Coca-Cola company started a marketing campaign in the 1950s where they dressed Father Christmas in Coca-Cola red. So we all now think that he dresses in red, but actually he dresses in green. And these are...
Really?
We don't even realise that a lot of this has become... I talk about it being visual literacy. We are extremely visually literate. Because we have access to thousands of images every single day. I read a report the other day saying that on average we see 3,000 images a day.
That's likely, yes.
And because our brains don't forget them, they're in there somewhere. And so all of that is basically what led me from image consultancy to personal branding, because it was an easy transition, because it was the concept that as people we all have attributes, we skills, we have our beliefs, our value systems, and we use those to express things in many, many ways. And part of the way that we do that is in how we present ourselves, both personally but in other aspects. So in business terms, it might be websites, business cards, logos, how we write on our blogs, the kinds of things we put into articles, how we tweet. All of those aspects are about building that brand around yourself.
Yeah. So personal branding has become quite... I guess in the small business world, personal branding has become quite important. And what do you see are the main... I mean, you've talked about websites and everything. Why is this important for small businesses to really focus on their personal branding?
I think all businesses need to, but I think that it's easier for small businesses because they have more control.
Okay.
If you are an employee within a larger corporate environment, yes, you can have a personal brand, but you do need to think about how your brand then meshes with that of your organisation. And when I work with corporate organisations, that's very much the kind of thing that I'm doing. But with the small business, the business startup or the person who, the business owner who has more control, it's about recognising that when you come up with a concept for a business, it comes from inside you.
Yes.
So
it's a reflection of yourself, isn't
absolutely. And so is your personal brand. So it's about marrying those two things together. So, for example, one of the things that I always start with people is creating a very strong values statement for them that they can then carry through to their business.
So that's a personal value.
Yeah,
statement.
but it's not a statement whereby somebody will sit down and say, okay, my values are that I'm trustworthy and I'm honest and I'm confident and those kinds of things. Because, quite often we can fool ourselves, okay? It's about getting people to identify the values by which they want to be known. And I work on the number 5, so I get them to identify 5 things, because I think 5 is a good number for an affirmation statement, etc. But we don't leave it at that. What we do is we ask people in a 360-degree process to come up with 5 words to describe them as well. And what we're looking for is we're looking for synonyms. We're looking for people who are saying similar things, because what they're basing their perception on is the person's behaviours. And it's our behaviours that really demonstrate who we are and, you know, how we act, what we do, what we believe. And classically, it's the kind of thing, for example, the News of the World doesn't exist anymore, but we know that when it was publishing, part of its reason why people bought it was it always had these like scandal stories in there. Okay, yeah. So you would have a story about where, we had something where Fergie was asked by a fake Arab sheikh about getting an interview with her ex-husband, and the thing with that kind, and people, after those kind of things, people quite often say, oh, you know, that isn't me, that isn't me. If you've got a true value statement, and in your value statement there are things about credibility, etc., if somebody comes along to you, whoever they are and however much money they offer you, and they say, I would like you to do something which is slightly morally off your absolutely, your response is, no, I don't do that sort of thing. So behaviour is actually a really, really key component. So it's at getting feedback from people at all levels, friends, family, bosses, staff, everybody in a 360-degree process around you. And then what we do is we take the 5 that person wants to own, and that then becomes the value basis for them and their business. It then becomes a checklist. So, for example, one of mine is the phrase fun-loving. I had a lot of jobs where I didn't have a lot of fun. And when I started working for myself, one of the things I wanted to make sure was that I enjoyed it. So often when a job comes up, I will look at it and I'll think, am I going to enjoy this? If the answer's yes, that's great. If I think, maybe not, I won't do the job.
Really?
Or if there's somebody that I start working with and perhaps it's not going the way that it should be going, and we're not gelling as we should, because, you know, what I do is quite personal with people, then I will say to somebody, I don't think that this is going to work. We should walk away from it, because it won't be fair to me and it won't be fair to them.
Even if you've spent your time, there's been,
give them their money back.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that credibility is part of me as well. So those values are absolutely key, because once you've got those, what you then start to do is weave those into everything that you do. They will inform the sort of business that you actually have. So classically, what a lot of people will do is they'll say, let's say I want to be a coach or a therapist, or something like that. They'll think, okay, I'll have a look around and I'll see what other coaches and other therapists are doing. What does their website look like? I'll meet them at networking. What do their business cards look like? How do they present themselves? Well, the problem with that is, yes, it is good market research, but if you then start modelling yourself on somebody, that person has got a completely different outlook on life, completely different value set. Okay, you do this work. What you can then do is you can go to a branding person or a graphic designer and you can say, look, I'm starting a coaching business, and my values are credibility, philanthropy, confidence. You can go through these. What I want is some kind of representation of that. Okay, so persons can then come up with, let's think about the colours you might use. So with things like coaching, you might want to use a palette of colours that are not too sharp and not too vibrant. You might want to go for something that's got a slightly softer element to it. Or you might want to go for things that encourage mental process, things like turquoises and purples and those kinds of colours. It will influence the kind of shapes you might go for. So if you're in a slightly softer business, would you go for things with edges? So would you go for things with squares and oblongs? Or might you go for things with soft curves? So you can actually start to look at how your business looks to other people, because they will look at that representation of your business, and they will read things into it. We don't even know we're doing it half of the time. That's what I say. It's this whole visual literacy. I do this brilliant exercise with people with carrier bags, which is why I love collecting carrier bags when I go abroad, because then people in this country can't associate something with it. So I break people into groups, I give them a carrier bag, and I say, okay, I want to know who carries this bag. I want to know what age they are, what gender they are, whether they live in the city or the country, how much they earn, all of those kinds of things. And you know what? They are generally spot on. They will say this is a man's bag, and they're in their 50s, and they're all, and because they know and they understand, they just don't know that they know. And this is the whole point about branding and about personal branding. It's about creating a persona for either the person or the business that speaks for itself.
That's really interesting. I don't think I've heard anyone talk about it in those terms.
Well, that's why I came up with that concept of the 4 V's principle, because that's basically the process that I take people through. So the first V is values. We always work on the values side of things. The second V is the visuals, and we work there on things like their personal presentations, so the way they dress and those sorts of things. And sometimes that can be a bit tricky, because you have to approach things like even down to people's teeth and that sort of stuff. Can be one of the things. Andrew Marr just needs to get his teeth done. Lovely, really interesting man, but anyway. So we look at the visual side, so the person plus the things around the business. So it will be, what does their website look like? What does their business card look like? What does their logo look like? Those sorts of things. Then we move into the vocal area. And the vocal area is the ability to talk about the business and to present, to stand up and be able to talk confidently about what it is and the value that you bring to people and those sorts of things. So everything from presentation skills through to pitching. And then, because I wanted to start with V, I had to think of a third word, the fourth word that came up. And the word that I came up with was verbal. And this is the person in written context. And this is how you, the copy on your website, the articles you write, the things you put in your blog, what you tweet about, what goes up on LinkedIn. So you in the written world. So it's about getting synergy, it's about getting alignment and congruency, I suppose, within those 4 things, that they're all on an even keel.
Yeah. Can you have those things subconsciously?
Oh, yeah. Okay. It's about getting people to recognise them, because this is the thing. Everybody has got a personal brand. Everybody's got a brand. People say, what's my USP? Well, you are. But what we need to do is we need to find out who you are. And that's where the value side of it comes in. Who are you? How does this make you unique? If you are a therapist, and I know quite a few, for example, who are hypnotherapists and may have studied a very similar curriculum and various things like that, might be working with a similar clientele. What makes them different? What makes one different from the other? They do. So it's about taking that aspect and demonstrating that externally. And it is exactly the same as Coke and Pepsi, because some people like Coke and some people like Pepsi. Let's face it, they're both colas, they're both brown, and they're both fizzy. And you can have therapist number 1 and therapist number 2. They do basically the same thing. What makes us choose one over the other? It's a personal gut reaction. The issue I find with a lot of smaller businesses is that they get to a certain space and they get to recognise that, and then what they don't do is they don't take it into the business structure. I think that's the big thing. A lot of people start thinking, oh yes, these are my values and this is what I stand for. And I hear a lot of people talking about their passion. Passion's key. Passion's the thing that gets you out of bed to do your business when you're feeling rough. and when the world isn't going the way you want it to go, but actually you need to actually have some systems and some structure in there as well. So all right, I look at these various things, but actually there's a strong business model sitting in underneath it as well. So that's a key point, because, as I said, I started a business in 2001. I didn't actually run a business until approximately 2009.
Really?
And the reason being is, I was earning money. Money was coming in and money was going out. But there was no system behind it. There was no business process behind it. I was getting customers by accident. And what I found was that when I started to realign what I was doing, the accidents didn't happen. So I thought, why am I not getting any people? I was doing that and it was working, and now I'm doing this, but it's not working, why not? And it was because there was no business structure there.
So how do you advise clients to think about those structures? Is it something you do, or other people do that?
No, absolutely. It's something that I do, because I believe that all of we've got a lovely bit of Bing Crosby there. It's lovely. Make me cry in a minute. Let's take it back one step. I'm a huge believer in the 80-20 rule. I believe the 80-20 rule rules the universe. And if you look at most things, they do break down into 80% and 20% of whatever. And I work with a lot of startups or businesses that have started and have basically stalled a little bit. And when I go and start working with these people, what I find is that they've got the 80% and the 20% the wrong way around. Because when you first start a business, you're going into something that you love. Okay? If you're not going to do something you love, don't do it. And the concept is that you're going to be doing the thing that you love 80% of the time, and that 20% of the time you'll put into accounting, marketing, networking, etc., etc. Okay? Whereas when you start, you need to flip the percentages. Because in fact, in order to get to the 80% of doing the thing you love, you first of all have to spend 80% of your time getting the structures right, getting the systems right. If you systemize something, it becomes matter of course, and it becomes fast and it becomes efficient. When you set the systems up, it's slow and it's a process and it's testing and it's measuring and seeing what works. So if you're going to go into becoming, let's think, a mobile hairdresser, for example, then yes, you will be out cutting people's hair a lot of the time. But in the scheme of things, that'll only be 20%, because the 80% needs to be you organising your marketing, keeping in contact with your customers, having systems for managing your accounts, your money, understanding how the money works in your business, getting out there, networking, all of those kinds of things. Okay, and that, for me, that's the biggest thing. It's actually saying to people, I love your idea, it's a brilliant business idea. Of course you can make it work, because anybody can make anything work, but we need to flip it a little bit. Yeah, we're going to get the values, we're going to look at the visual side, we're going to work on your vocals, we're going to work on the verbal elements, but they're all embedded within a solid business structure. So the visual elements, the vocal elements, etc., they're within your business plan. The values have to be embedded within the business plan, because the values then lead you to your target market group. Your target market group then tells you how you're actually going to get your messages out to those people. So you will be sending slightly different messages out to, if you're working with high net worth individuals, than perhaps if you're working with people on a lower income. So the values are key to that. So then that feeds into all of the business planning processes, so you can actually start looking and looking at what your cash flow will be over year 1, year 2, year 3, getting your projections in there, and building all of these elements into whatever plan it is that you develop. So yeah, it's on a very, very firm business footing, but it's actually taking that concept of branding the business, branding the person, and layering that into the business plan. And one of the things I always insist that people do is that they put an element within their plan that is headed life, family and friends.
Oh, really? Why?
Because what most people do when they put a traditional business plan together is that they ignore the draws on their time.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
And, I work with a lot of women, not exclusively women, but I do work with a lot of women. And, a lot of women who have got family, perhaps young children, or they might even be carers for their parents, etc. And that's really going to impact on how much time you've got to give to various things, or how you structure your day. So if you take a young mum who's got, say, a couple of kids that are at school, she's not going to generally do necessarily a 9-to-5 job, but she may get up at 6:30 and do an hour in the morning, then drop the kids off at school, then perhaps work from about 10 through till about 2:30, get them back from school, and then do some work in the evening, 7:30 through till about 10. So that's a very, very different day structure. Also, people forget to put in things like the fact they might need a holiday, they need to remember birthdays, etc. The other thing it allows you to do is, because starting a business, for example, or really getting into your business to make it work takes time, it allows you to contact people to say, look, I may not be available when you phone me. If I say I can't talk, it's for this reason. I had a client who, very, very sociable woman, and she was the shoulder that everybody wanted to cry on. And people would phone her, and it wouldn't be a 10 or 15 minute conversation, it would be a 2-hour conversation.
I was just going to say an hour.
Yeah, they'd get back from work and they'd have had a horrible day, and she would then be on the phone for a couple of hours. She may well have been in the middle of working on a newsletter or something to send out. So that 2 hours now has disappeared.
Yeah.
And one of the things I said to her was, well, what you've got to do is work out a strategy so that you still remain a friend, but it's in terms that allows you to do things. So rather than saying to people, phone me whenever, why not just say once a month, Saturday is open house. I'm going to have the kettle on, I'm going to have wine, I'm going to have whatever. Just pop in, we'll sit and we'll chat and get all of that out. And then that means that you're still keeping that friendship going, but in a way that you can manage. So if you don't put that friends, family and life element into your plan, you can start getting pulled off in other directions, and it's one of the biggest things that scuppers people's plans.
I have to say that I'm guilty of that.
We all are.
No, seriously, and it's interesting you say what you say, because I find that now my time is there's a lot of pressure on my time. I have so many things to do now. And a friend of mine said on Facebook yesterday, I'm feeling a bit poorly. Normally, I'll just call her up, but this was yesterday, Wednesday. I can't call her up till Friday because I just don't have the time.
Yeah.
In between, and I found myself saying, I'll call you on Friday. I was like, wow, Viv, it's taking you 2 days to call a friend who's ill, and that's really it's food for thought for me now to really see how I manage this going forward.
Yeah, and the people do feel massively guilty about these things, but it's about groundwork. It's about preparing people and saying, it's not that I don't like you, it's not that I don't love you, it's just that this is important and I need to focus on these things. So perhaps we need to structure it. Perhaps we need to make sure that, it could be a husband and wife team, for example. I was talking to somebody at a networking event yesterday evening, and she said, one evening a week, her parents have the children so that she and her husband can have
Quality time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually acknowledging this. It's about creating a plan. The thing that I find is that if you have a structure, if you have a plan, if chaos happens, it's much easier to manage if you know what the route is, so that if things go wrong, all you do is you rejig the plan. If there's no plan there, it's starting from scratch. I heard somebody talk about the difference between people who are successful and people who are not so successful, and they said that the people who are successful, when an opportunity comes along, they've planned everything out so that when an opportunity comes along, they recognise it and they can say either yes or no. Okay, yes, I'm going to go for that. Less successful people don't have a plan, so when an opportunity comes along, they then have to start thinking about the plan around it, and by the time they've done that, the opportunity's passed. So the thing is, when you put a plan together, it's not as if it's one of the 10 Commandments. It's not written in stone. It's written on a piece of paper, hopefully. And I actually use wallpaper lining paper to write plans on, because you can tear off great big long sheets and you can mark them out January through December, and and if it goes wrong, screw it up, throw it away. It's 99 pence a roll. Who cares? And you put in there that in January I'm going to do this, February I'm going to do that, March I'm going to do that, blah blah blah, all the way through. And then you get to the end of January, you think, oh crikey, I said I was going to do that, but I didn't. So let's put that into February. And all you do is you jiggle up the line. You can make changes. Or, what's even better, because people do overdo things, is say, I didn't do that in January. The reason I didn't do it is I don't actually really want to do it, so let's scrap it. Okay, it's like things on to-do lists. Yeah. There's always the bottom 3 things on the to-do list. If there's been 3 things on the bottom of your to-do list for more than 3 weeks, cross them off and never even think about them again. Because if you were going to do them, they'd be done.
Yeah, that's very true. So some of the things you do, you mentor people.
Yes.
You're a business mentor.
Yeah.
And what has that been like for you?
I love it. I mentor in a couple of ways. I mentor both, primarily business. I do some career mentoring, but it is primarily business, and I do it on a one-to-one basis. So I work with people, we identify their need or needs, and we work out a program to cover those. So it could be that somebody has got just one specific thing that they might want to work on.
Yeah.
Or it could be that people have got a whole variety of things. So it really, really depends. So I use a questionnaire with people to gauge where they are. I give them feedback on that, and then we work out the program from that area. Okay. I also do small groups.
Okay.
Because let's face it, if I'm working one-to-one with somebody, it's slightly more expensive, and particularly if I'm working with startups, money is an issue. So it's a good idea then if we can get 4, 5, 6, 8 people together and spread the cost. And the great thing about that then is they're forming a bond, they're forming a network, and they're forming a support system.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we can do that. And actually, one of the plans for next year, I've started working. Funnily enough, I've started working on a joint venture with somebody who was a client. Okay. Now I will be the first person to hold my hand up and say, I understand money to a certain extent because I have to as a business person. But I'm not a financial person. No, no way at all. I know how to spend it. Yes, but she is. So what we've decided to do is to put a program together for people who want to really grow their business during 2013. And it's going to have all aspects of business in it, from planning through marketing, selling, all the money handling things, lots of things to do with HR as well, and managing people, and preparing your business for growth in that sense. So we're doing that on a group basis. So that's the kind of mentoring that I do, and I can work. I do work face to face with people, but I do work over technology as well. So Skype is fine, Google Plus is fine. We can hang out on Google Plus. So that's another way of doing it too.
And what kind of clients do you have? And do they vary?
Yeah, they do. I mean, they vary in age, they vary in gender. I will say that primarily it's women. But then I think that's quite telling, in as much as I think this is the first year ever that women's startup businesses have outstripped the number of male startup businesses.
Tell us about that, because that's interesting information, actually.
Well, I mean, it's something that I heard James Caan speaking about a little while ago, and it was back in 2011. Actually, the prediction was that more women. It would be the first time ever more women will be starting businesses than men. And I know anecdotally from my experience a lot of women who have been made redundant who have said, okay, that's it. I don't want to go through that again. In fact, I met a woman not so long ago. This was her 6th redundancy. And she is 49 years of age.
No.
And she said, if I go into an organisation, I'm going to have to start from scratch again. And I'm just not prepared for that. So I've got this redundancy money. I'm going to do something for myself. And this is what I'm coming up against. There are a lot of people. There's also a lot of people who are not necessarily just starting businesses, but starting social enterprises as well. So the concept of business, but actually a business that gives back. So that's a really, really interesting way to take things forward.
Okay, so you've mentioned one of the things, because I was thinking that with 2013 coming along, I guess I'll start with 2012. Has 2012 been a good year for you?
It's been a really, really good year. It's been an interesting year. I started the year, I developed some mentoring programs, and I started the year with those, and they've been pretty successful. And as with most things, you learn as you go along the bits that work and perhaps the bits that don't work so much. And I've been able to remodel those over the course of the year, and they're coming out as a shiny new package in 2013 under the heading of Brilliant Visions. Making the impossible possible.
Yeah.
And the kinds of things that people have been really keen on this year. They've been really, really strongly keen on things to do with brand. A lot of small businesses
I'm getting the concept of having a person.
Absolutely, and also then how does that translate into the business, and what do we do with the brand of the business? So very much looking at a program that covers that specifically. So it goes from everything from the value statement through to the actual look of the person and the brand. So I've been taking that through this year and remodelling that for the beginning of next year. I'm also lucky to be working with some great people next year. I don't know, do you know Sonia Brown? Have you come across Sonia Brown?
Yes, I think I have.
She runs a website called Sister Talk.
Yes.
Yeah, and she's just started a business growth program called Evolve, and I'm going to be working with her on the brand part of that next year. So I'm really, really pleased about that.
Oh,
so.
Very, very good. So, I guess just to round up, what advice would you give anyone who's thinking of starting a business in 2013? Because, as you know, lots of people would be reflecting on this year, what they did right, and what possibly could happen in 2013. So what advice would you give?
Advice would be around clarity. And it's the clarity of what you are selling and who you're selling it to. So it starts with identifying the product, whether the product is you, and this comes down to product and service-based businesses. So if you're a service-based business, it's still a product. So I would get you to think about very much what it is that you're actually selling and who you want to sell it to, and actually really, really strongly identifying that target grouping. Getting a strong plan in there beneath you so that you've got a strategy for taking things forward. And I don't mean that, necessarily the traditional bank-based business plan, although they are useful. But it is about knowing where you want to be at this time next year and the year after and the year after that. I usually get people to work on 5 years because I think that's a good structure. But it's actually getting the nitty-gritty done. What am I selling? Who am I selling it to? And how am I going to sell it? Okay. So once you've got that, you can then start to build things into it. You need to do some solid research. The 2 places I would totally recommend that you go to is that you go to the British Library IP Centre in Euston Road. You have to become a member of that if you want to use all of their resources.
It's free, so.
Yeah, absolutely free. The other place I would recommend that you go is the City Business Library, which is a public library, but it's reference only, and it's chock full of very, very valuable business information. Both the British Library and the City Business Library run a full programme of seminars. All of the ones at the City Business Library, and they run them Monday through Friday, morning and afternoon, are free. So, it's everything there, from how to choose a website to how to use LinkedIn to how to look after your health, running a business, loads of stuff there. So I definitely recommend those. There's a brilliant book I love, which is by a guy called Robert Craven, and it's called Grow Your Service Firm. And it's a how-to book, and I love it because it's got lots of bullet points, so you can go through it and you can tick off done it. Okay, and I think the other thing is don't feel that you have to do it all on your own. I'm a mentor. I'm not a coach. I'm more bossy than a coach. But there are people out there that can help, support and guide you. And all of us, I've got mentors that I've used for years and people that can help me with various things. Don't feel that you have to do it on your own, because there are lots and lots of people out there that can give you help and support.
Wow, fantastic.
And just one more
Yes,
thing,
go on.
okay? If you are over 50 and you want to start a business and you are currently unemployed or you're in the process of being made redundant, there's a brilliant program called PRIME, PRIME, and it's the Prince's Initiative for Mature Enterprise, and it's basically the equivalent of the Prince's Trust but for older people, and they offer an 8-week program to take you through the process of actually developing and creating a business plan. And you get lots of help, support and resources, and you also, in that 8 weeks, you get 3 training days. I'm actually one of their trainers, so I know what an excellent program it is. So I would definitely recommend, if you're over 50 and thinking about it, check out Prime.
Wow, thank you very much. That's been really helpful. This has been Viv at Dream Corner. We've been at the Royal Festival Hall. And Kathy, a very, very good interview.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Honestly, it's been really, really good. Yeah. So I'm pleasantly surprised that we covered, all the stuff we covered about personal branding. It's very, very useful. So, yes, thanks if you've kept us company for this 1 hour. And, check out the interview later on. Bye-bye.
Bye.